It's not in order, but it's one of the Bob has the fourth B. Pick up to the second bar. one repeat,
Yeah.
we'll take it. from the winter, so let's see, number 7. Currently 2025. Yeah, so I want to make sure we get to do you want to do it now? We can just do it during the it's all right. No one can hear anything anyway. Winter, right? 3 flats, 3 flats. 3 flats, yeah. Oh, wait. Wait. Oh, I'm in spring. Oh, you're in the wrong season. Sorry about that. Out of season. I like spring. It should be for the last autumn and summer. Yes, this is right here. Which? Yeah. This movement too? Huh? Yeah, that's it. This one, right? That's it. Number 2. Letter E. That's it. Okay. Number 2. All right. So we have 16 notes, so it's slow. tempo. I'm gonna play arco. Oh yeah. Oh, you know what? I wonder if maybe should I play arco or pits? Huh? Arco? Okay. Yeah. Oh, now we're on Indian, right? What? On the, now we're doing the Indian stuff. Bliss, right? Bliss? Bliss. Bliss. Yeah. And I have, yeah. Thank you. Okay, well, ready? 1, 2. one has repeats, right? Foot pressure. Gluck from the book. From the book. Gluck is the last, it should be the last one right before wedding. But we'll take 2 measures of intro. We'll play this, and then you come in. So the first 2 bars are repeated to give him an intro before he comes in. Did you for this one? This one, and she's saying repeat these 2 bars. What would you like?
I don't know. I don't know.
Arioso, I mean. I don't think I have that.
Yeah, it's in
How much time?
It's number 2 in the wedding section.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Is that okay? Bob, is that okay with you? And then I think that'll take us out. Someone pick something quick. Okay, something else. Do you want to do the hydrant?
That would finish us.
Huh?
If you want to, it's loud. I mean, it's loud now, so you don't have to feel so.
Do it. Yeah. Come on.
What are you talking about? What? Oh.
We just had to know what I was it's up to you.
I don't know. We might be done. What are we doing? Hydrant?
Oh, we are doing. Okay.
No repeat.
What, the first
Yeah.
movement of the law?
Up to Bob.
That? It's fine. Yeah.
What?
First one repeat.
With the repeat?
First repeat?
Yeah.
Whatever we need.
Let's do the repeat.
The first
repeat.
one.
Okay. Okay. Hold it. Okay. We're playing Richard.
You want more? Any more time? One more is great. One more is great. And thank you so much.
Okay.
In two.
Yeah. leave it here for now, or?
No, just let's take everything with
Okay.
us. That way we
All right.
can sort it.
Okay.
Hi there. Hi there. My name's Richard Burns, and I want to thank you all for being with us today to honor Urvashi Vaid. That's right. There are lots and lots of people to thank for making this event possible. The teams at Congregation Besimchat Torah, our host, B'nai Jeshurun, and the American LGBTQ+ Museum. And in particular, I want to thank Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum, Ray Carey, and Eliza Bayard. Amazing leadership. We're going to hear today from some longtime friends and colleagues of Urvashi, And then we very much hope that you'll all join us at the reception afterwards for some Indian snacks. Right this way. You can see in your program that there is a campaign underway to put Urvashi on a United States postage stamp. Now, stamps are planned 3 years in advance. And the time is long overdue for us to have an activist lesbian leader on our mail. This will be, you'll be shocked to know, this will be a very political process. And the people in this room can make it happen. Urvashi and I met 42 years ago on our first day of law school in 1980 at Northeastern University in Boston. She was in the student lounge reading a copy of Gay Community News, where I had been the managing editor until the day before. We quickly became friends and co-conspirators at the law school and at GCN, the National Queer Liberation News Weekly, where so many of us figured out who we were as activists. Irv believed in radical change and in breaking some dishes, but she also believed in the necessity of building social infrastructure and in working in community and in institutions. She created, led, and participated in so many organizations and projects and boards, and I want to bear witness to the vastness of her work and her passions, and this is just a tiny part of the litany. A turning point in her life and in the life of our movement was when she joined the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force in 1986, first as the Director of Communications and then later as the Executive Director. She positioned the task force to reflect her vision of a bigger movement, one that would act with the integrity that her vision and principles required, a movement that would work at the intersections of race and gender and money and queerness, and it wasn't easy. Back when we were in law school, she joined the board of GLAAD, the legal organization founded in Boston to fight police harassment and entrapment of gay men in bathrooms and parks, and which went on to establish our right to marry in Massachusetts. Urvashi later served on the national board of the American Civil Liberties Union and co-founded LPAC, the first lesbian political action committee. She started Justice Works and the Donors of Color Network. She was chair of the Planned Parenthood Action Board of Directors. She co-founded the National LGBTQ+ Anti-Poverty Action Network, the National LGBT HIV Criminal Justice Working Group, and for the last 5 years of her life, she was a co-founder of the American LGBTQ Museum for History and Culture. How many of you can say LGBTQ+ that fast? And in her spare time, she co-created the Provincetown Commons, the collaborative space for artists in P-Town. Irv's impact on philanthropy will probably never be fully measured. She played key roles at 3 of the largest funders for LGBT equality in the world. At the Ford Foundation, she rose quickly and for 5 years advocated not only for LGBT equality, but for increased support in the rural South. She was the executive director of the Arcus Foundation for another 5 years and successfully integrated racial justice into the foundation's DNA, a commitment that they continue to this day. And she spent 10 years on the board of the Gill Foundation, another of the largest key funders for our equality in the United States. And as you know, her impact as a writer and thinker was tremendous. She reached so many people with speeches at national marches on Washington, like the one in 1993. And then when she left the task force to work on her first book, Virtual Equality, she went on the college circuit to make her living and spoke all over the country. And she was able to reach thousands and thousands of rising leaders through these talks and to inspire and ignite many young future activists. And on and on and on. I've watched some of Irv's early speeches from 30 years ago, and as has been reported, she was ahead of most of us in beseeching and demanding and leading our movement for equality into a broader movement for freedom and justice for everybody, and to make us all understand the direct connection between our LGBT equality and reproductive justice and gender and racial justice. So today, we mark the loss and we celebrate Urvashi, the charismatic, inspiring movement leader. It's a movement-shaking loss, but it's also profoundly personal for so many people in this room. Irv was generous, she was tough, and she was kind. She was bossy, and she really hated it when people tried to boss her, as some of you know. She could be quick to anger and quick to forgive. Her ability to challenge us all was so imbued with compassion and love and charm that we could take it. And she was relentless, and she was endlessly supportive, and we fought constantly. She liked to dance, and she liked to talk about sex. She liked to cook Indian food, and she liked to send you home with leftovers. Urvashi always challenged us. She challenged me and gave us a lot to think about. She was a lot. And Irv's deepest happiness was rooted in her multiple decades love affair with Kate. That gave her so much joy. I know that I think about Irv every day, and I know that I and that all of us will keep on fighting with integrity and anger and joy and laughter with love. Thank you. And now I'd like us all to welcome Natalia Kanem.
Thank you, Richard. A girl, immersed in the love of her family and rooted in the richness of her culture, leaves India at a tender age for wintry upstate New York. Bright, brilliant, and beautiful, an observer, yet a doer, with a spark of vivacity and curiosity to become defining characteristics. From that young age, she recognized her talents and her beauty. She owned herself and her right to exist exactly, perfectly as she was. This girl would go on to excel in the law. She would build community, organize people from all walks of life. Distinguished by gifts of clarity and boldness, a willingness to speak out and champion the truth, Urvashi Vaid took the microphone at the 1993 March on Washington and electrified everyone, declaring, "We call for the end of this world as we know it. We call for the end of racism and sexism and bigotry as we know it, for the end of violence and discrimination and homophobia as we know it. We stand for freedom as we have yet to know it, and we will not be denied." Equipped with compelling arguments, Urvashi changed business as usual into business unusual in defense of poor people and anyone else labeled as disadvantaged in the unjust social order that neglects rather than protects, that finger points instead of pointing the way to equality, to equity, and a shared common good. At the Ford Foundation's Peace and Social Justice program where we met, she led a team spearheading governance transformation, moving resources into the hands of local groups and into state houses. How prescient she was. We struck a bargain early on as comrades in arms, not to just join philanthropy, but to do whatever possible to bend the levers of power of the institutions towards liberation, towards justice. Our vice president at the time, Brad Smith, recalls Urvashi as thoroughly radical, yet thoroughly fun. She'd walk in with a gleam in her eye and say, "I have an idea." And immediately, I knew I was in for a tough budget discussion and one that she was going to win. Urvashi excelled at connecting the dots across those lines of gender and sexuality and race and class. She upheld everyone's inherent right to live life in larger freedom, as promised by the United Nations Charter. And she used her power and never once flinched from truth-telling, even as she innovated in her leadership in pioneering civil society organizations and pioneering new foundations that tackled LGBTQ+ rights and other vital issues. And let me tell you that she never backed down. She never once blinked. Intellect met passion. She cared deeply, and she was willing to act on her beliefs. And it helped that she was shrewdly pragmatic, a strategist, and she was relentless. She exemplified the power of perseverance. Dear Urvashi, you built our community and connected all of us with such tenderness and such dedication. Your classmates, study group, Breasties, Les Talk, the Irvies in the Provincetown She Shed, for all the colleagues and the students and the queer activists, the global feminists, the writers, the academics, the regular working people, and especially the diverse staffs that you built and you led so fearlessly during your remarkable time of making philanthropy more righteous, less self-righteous. So for the immigrant international girls like you and I were, who you championed, on all of us, your transcendent enthusiasm for life, your clamoring for fairness and for justice has left an indelible imprint. And especially Team Urvashi, all of the extraordinary friends and superb caregivers who, led by Kate, managed a system of loving care with care. That certainly allowed Urvi to keep up her vibrancy right to the last, and we applaud you, all of you. And always alongside each other and encouraging and uplifting each other, Irv and Kate. We bore witness to that storied love that never quit. Dear Kate, that legendary bond goes on, and it's beautiful. Urvashi's spirit lives on, her boundless joy of living while one is alive. So I close with lines drawn from Marie Howe's tribute to her brother Johnny, who died from complications of HIV, and it's titled, "What the Living Do." This is it, what you called that yearning, what you finally gave up. We want the spring to come and the winter to pass. We want whoever to call or not call, a letter, a kiss. We want more and more and then more of it. But there are moments walking when I catch a glimpse of myself in the window glass, and I'm gripped by a cherishing so deep that I'm speechless. I am living. I remember you.
Hi, everyone. Let the poets know that there are some forms of loss that can never be placated. No turn of phrase, no master class of a metaphor, no narrative cunning enough to charm away the monstrosity of an untimely death. Instead, we wear it like a family heirloom, clench on to grief like the newest old friend, set an empty seat at every dinner table for the rest of our lives. Our lives, the way we live them, become the memorial. Once upon a time, I knew a person so beautiful that she had the courage to be herself, an everyday riot. I didn't know that was possible until I met her. I didn't know I was possible until I met her. She had anger more incandescent than the sun, it was only outmatched by her love. Certainly, Urvashi was renowned for her forensic diagnosis of every wrong, but what sometimes gets lost is her conviction of what was right about us, we, the degenerate queers, intubated by a culture that tells us that we should precise our disappearing act, call it a personality. Urvashi believed that we, the sinners and freaks, that we were beautiful not despite it, but precisely because of it. Urvashi used to say that she was envious of me because I was an artist. She said her brain just didn't work that way. I disagreed. That was our love language, disagreement. Urvashi was a visual artist. She developed a self-image of queer people for queer people. She showed us the grandeur of our gender nonconformity, our sexuality, our relationships. She loved all the things we were taught to hate about ourselves, and she did so by making the everyday choice to be free. To not wait for validation nor the conferral of legitimacy, but to seize it herself, freedom, to cultivate it in herself first, like a secret garden, then to share it with all of us when it bloomed too big. She was the biggest laugh in every room, hearty and full of heart. She had a zest for living that made the rest of us realize that we were merely existing, and so we had no other choice but to up the ante. You could feel it in everything she did. She genuinely believed that she could make a 5-year plan to abolish the right wing. Because she found a way to live an impossible life, she believed in an impossible world. She made us confront that the failure isn't one of policy, it never is. It's always one of imagination. Urvashi brought a devotional love into everything she did, from home renovation to party planning, to showing up every day at the hospital for my grandfather at the end of his life, to insisting on convening family Zoom gatherings during the pandemic, to calling me back over and over again when I didn't answer her texts immediately. She was my family's paramedic, anchor, compass, confidant, emergency contact, champion. She lived a life that took all of the empty terms out there in the world that we decorate with, like love and family, and she made them real, clarified them. Family was her encouraging me to bring my friends as my significant other to every event. Love was her workshopping their career trajectories for the rest of the evening. During quarantine, Urvashi and I sat down for an intergenerational conversation about the queer movement. She'd recently received her diagnosis, and we were thinking about the need to leave something permanent behind, thinking about legacy. At one point in our conversations, she said, "I do criticize myself, Alok. Did I really resist? What became of all of those radical dreams?" Legacy is not about what we leave behind, it's about who. I am who I am. I am who because of Urvashi's radical dreams. Since she died, I've been on tour all across the world, and strange things keep happening. I keep seeing the same sunset everywhere I go. People all over the world come to me and tell me that Urvashi changed their lives. What a way to live a life, such that you have a portable sunset in every corner of the earth, reflected back in the faces of the people who love you. When I miss her most, I grab a microphone and I try my best to speak the truth to power. Sometimes I can feel her there, disagreeing with me, of course. Her spirit lives on in me and in this voice. Even in death, she lives. Thanks so much.
I'm Tony Kushner. The first time I remember meeting Urvashi was at the Outright Conference in Boston in 1995 when I was giving the keynote address. While I was speaking, I became aware that someone was standing on the auditorium floor below the podium, hissing up at me, slow down, you're talking too fast." I looked down, and there was this short, arms-waving, slightly frantic, pissed-off, and bemused-looking lesbian, and I fell hopelessly, entirely in love. I'm not 100% sure that this was my first time meeting her. I certainly knew who she was before I met her. Everyone knew who Urvashi Vaid was, and maybe I'd been introduced to her and Kate right before the speech. I know that this was the first time, though certainly not the last, that I was the target of Urvashi's exasperation and impatience. The first time I experienced how disarming her exasperated impatience could be, how immediately you surrendered to it, if not necessarily to its particulars. For instance, my speech was way too long and I needed to talk fast. But even when Urvashi let you know that she was fed up with your bullshit, just behind the exasperation, there was this irresistible, undeniable embrace coming out at you, an infolding and an outreach. So much was unique about Irv. She was an absolute original. Her brilliant mind, her courage, her kindness, decency, honesty, her energy, her generosity were unlike anyone else's. But it was this electric power of assumed, insisted upon connection that from the first time I found myself on the path of its trajectory struck me as something absolutely new, something this short, frantic, gorgeous, pissed off, and bemused-looking lesbian had simply conjured up. Urvashi was a pragmatist and a practical strategist, wary of abstraction that couldn't survive exposure to reality. But Urvashi was also an unembarrassed sensualist, grappling with difficult ideas, puzzling over conundrums, even savoring mysteries when they seemed to her genuine mysteries and not excuses for cowardice or the consequence of intellectual laxity. Thinking and discussing gave Urvashi a very serious kind of pleasure. Maybe not as much pleasure as being in the thick of action, organizing human energy and money into maps for the road ahead, and then actuating what she'd organized, making palpable, measurable change. This is what made Urvashi an activist rather than an artist or an intellectual. But there was art in everything she did. How many other organizer activists of genius could recite Keats's Ode to Autumn word perfect or sing Adelaide's Lament complete with Damon Runyon accent? And of course, there was profound thought behind every action Irv originated, directed, or participated in. Her robust, tough thinking, her deep understanding of the importance of praxis, of marrying thought to action, is what accounts for her rather spectacular track record. I can't claim to have anything like the depth of familiarity with her life's work that many people here today possess. But how often was Urvashi wrong? Not about the small things, all of us are wrong about those all the time, but in terms of the paths that might lead to advances in justice and enfranchisement and actual meaningful progress and liberation. In terms of the projects to which she devoted herself, wasn't she pretty much always right? It seems to me that Urvashi's, sure. I hope I'm not talking too fast. I took a Xanax before I started this, so I think I'm slowed down. It seems to me that Irv's clarity about the big things owed a lot to her self-awareness and honesty, her willingness to bust herself when she was wrong about the small things, to always consider the possibility of error. She had a healthy ego. She enjoyed her hard-earned, entirely deserved renown. It set her teeth on edge when she had to endure being lectured by some baby activist who imagined she, they, or he, most often he, had invented the LGBTQ movement. I loved listening to Urvashi get grouchy and petty, but I also loved how reliably she'd compel herself to rise above her grouchiness and worked to reconnect. The stakes of the struggle were always very high and always clear as day for her. The real stakes for Urvashi were never her reputation or recognition. She opposed but didn't fetishize disenfranchisement. She didn't fetishize poverty, she wanted to eliminate it. She didn't mistake politics for personal purity, too sane to delude herself that she possessed purity to a greater degree than is generally possible for human beings. too happy being human to aspire to purity. She understood that the world can't change for the better without building bridges and forging solidarity, and Urvashi was a builder and a forger to her marrow bones. She was never a scourge or a scold, nor a factionalist. Urvashi wanted power only if it was communally, collectively generated and employed in the furtherance of social and economic justice, of equality, community, and life. She had a great sense of humor because she understood, and forgive me, Irv, for borrowing a line from a reactionary asshole like G.K. Chesterton, but it's a good line. She understood that injustice is a surprise, an anomaly, an aberration in existence. And Urvashi would be the first to say how much she learned about laughter, about how much she learned about how to be serious and sexy, electrically present with electrifying generosity and grace, public and private, how to be spectacularly human and wise from her partner and wife and soulmate, the great Kate, without whom the Urvashi I knew and will always love is as unimaginable as the world has become unimaginable without Urvashi. Kate and Urvashi were among the first of my friends to whom I introduced my future husband when I started going out with him, and even though Mark and I aren't especially sociable, at any rate not as sociable as Kate and Urvashi, and was anyone, including Kate, ever as genuinely, wholeheartedly sociable as Urvashi? Sometimes it was frightening. Kate and Urvashi were two of the central pillars of our life together, and our lives together as a foursome have been, for Mark and me, a source of essential sustenance and joy. I even convinced Urvashi about 12 years ago that we should buy a house and move in together in Provincetown. Urvashi was a kind of enthusiasm addict, and she and I got caught up in this lunacy for 2 summers, house hunting for the house we were all going to live in together, while Kate and Mark rolled their eyes and waited for us to come to our senses. My guess is that Irv never really intended to move in with me. We both knew it wouldn't work. Our spouses would have divorced us. We enjoyed looking at houses and spending time together. We loathed the same people mostly. We revered the same people mostly. We sometimes liked or loathed the same books, plays, movies, or TV. I'm an on-again, off-again activist, and I don't really know what she thought of me as a writer. And while ordinarily that would matter to me a lot, with Irv, it never mattered much. I know we loved each other, and we had each other's back. In perplexity or vexity, or when I was lost, when I needed help turning anger towards action rather than despair, I'd turn to her. I always felt that whatever my failings, Urvashi was my friend because she knew my heart. Urvashi had a handle on mysteries. For that reason, and for many, many other reasons, our friendship was and will always remain for me an unaccountable, incomprehensible, immeasurable blessing. I know I share feeling blessed by her with everyone present today. So together, we'll hold Urvashi in our hearts, the hearts she knew and embraced, and we'll uphold Kate, whom we adore entirely and ferociously. And I hope we'll uphold each other, all of us, enfranchised citizens of the United States of Urvashi. I know we'll always hear her. I know we'll always hear her voice calling to us, summoning us to organize and fight and to have fun, to find joy in doing it. Urvashi was and is mighty, and it goes without saying we're all going to miss her mightily every day for as long as we live.
Hi, we're 2/3 of Betty. One of the other third is resting because she's old and has a kid and another kid on the way. No, she's in California. We grew up with Irv in D.C. We all became activists together, and angry and sexual and laughing and loving and hating Reagan so much, and it brought us all together, and we thought that was bad. So the first thing that I thought of actually when Roe v. Wade was decimated was, holy fuck, where's Irv? But we keep fighting, and we do it in her name, with so much love and so much happiness and so much open sexuality. I miss Irv every day, and I think about her a lot. We were in a breast cancer group together called the Breasties, and some of us are here. And it was a great breast cancer group because we kvetched a lot, but we also ate. So that's all we ever did, and we're still together, and we do have to get together again. I'm happy to be here and proud and honored to be singing.
The first time that we met Irv was at a concert in the 80s, maybe 1984. And so when I close my eyes and I think about her, I always see her last year in her backyard, dancing around, so happy that she'd made a perfect frittata with that giant speaker of hers that she always had to crank up so loudly. And that's how I always think of Irv. My favorite thing about her is the way that everybody keeps saying about how she connects people, how she somehow always could find the highest common denominator. We are in this together. We are in this together. Money's tight everywhere, overworked. I don't care as long as we are in this together. Oh, do your dreams fade in the night? Keep believing it's alright. It's alright. It's alright. We are in this together. We are in this together. Danger worlds in the air, overwhelmed. I don't care as long as we are in this together. Oh, change is worth the fight. Keep believing it's alright. It's alright. It's alright. Hold, 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 hold on through the dusk till dawn. Side by side, by side, by side, by side, by side. Carry on. Hey! Hearts can break without repair. Overcome. I don't care as long as we are in this. We are in this. We are. We are in this together. 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 We are in this together.
Irv!
You know, I was sitting there thinking about my father, who didn't give me a lot of advice, but one thing was never follow a music act. It's actually not right that I am here because I'm so much older than Urvashi. It's not right. It's not in the order of things. But on the other hand, as long as we are here and forevermore in the future, as long as we quote, remember, and love her, she is with us. So she will always, always be with us. And I think of her at all the demonstrations we ever went to, and her words always clear and defiant, also unifying, and they are still with us. I think of Urvashi in her living room, welcoming all views and serving all food. Actually, we had in common our escapes from our homes because I had gone to India to rebel and she had come here to rebel. I think of Urvashi and our shared views of India, her own growing up there and my 2 years there. In fact, there was a certain irony in the fact that we each had escaped to the country of the other, and it was not lost in us. I think of our dream of a future without adjectives, when questions about sex on a form could simply be answered yes or no. I think of this and so much more, and I want to remember, and I will remember, and I know each of us will remember. And so, as long as we do remember, she will be with us. And that means that we can pass her on to the young. We can tell stories of what she did, as incredible as they will seem to young people. We can talk about the great boundaries she overcame. We can talk about her cooking. We can talk about her jokes. We can talk about the whole glorious person that she was and she is. Because each of you has come today, she is with us in this room, and she will be with us forever. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scot Nakagawa. I actually got similar advice, Gloria, though my advice came from my friend Kat Gunn, who accompanied me 2 days, who said, never follow Gloria Steinem. I have never had an opportunity to mourn Urvashi's passing, I realized. I live in a tiny little corner of the desert in Southern California. And so this is my first time being with people, celebrating her. Root for me so I can get through this. Urvashi and I first met in the run-up to the 1992 elections. At the time, she worked for the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, and I was serving as a director of statewide development of something called the No on 9 campaign for a hate-free Oregon. It was a campaign that eventually defeated a ballot measure that proposed to change the Oregon Constitution to have LGBTQ people named abnormal, wrong, unnatural, and perverse, while equating us legally with pedophiles. I offered that detail in Urvashi's name, as she was ever one to remind us that the struggle is never over. By the time I met Irv, she was already a movement rock star, known to country bumpkins like me because of a singular act of stunning courage she continues to be famous for, standing up to and telling off the President of the United States at a press conference. That, as I'm sure she was aware, sent up a signal flare to people like me who were among the first generation of queer people of color to rise to national leadership. To us, that act and her leadership in a mostly white queer movement, one that was often hostile to people of color, made her our Urvashi, our movement avatar. I can't tell you how excited I was to meet her. Urvashi and I bonded politically because she saw what I saw. We both recognized that we were facing a real political movement funded by aspiring oligarchs that was challenging for power at a time when the political center of American politics was weak, floundering in the failure to keep up with the corporate right, and mired in nostalgia for a mid-century political consensus, the basis for which was long gone, even then. Since that first meeting, we tried to collaborate many times, but fate kept that ambition at bay until 2 years ago when Urvashi reached out to me with one line: "I think it's time for us to do something." Over a year of meetings, email exchanges, and texts, we conjured up the 22nd Century Initiative, a national strategy and action hub that is building power at the intersection of defending democratic institutions, defeating authoritarianism, and building democracy, as Irv put it when she suggested the name, "In this century and the next." Over the course of that planning year, I would learn more than I'd learned over the course of the last 10. I would offer analysis, and Irv would suggest, gently sometimes, not so gently at other times, that unless I had a solution, I should stop, quoting another friend, stop admiring the problem. Now and then I would go off on a tangent and Urvashi would calm me down. She had the most remarkable discipline and focus. I would find myself saying, "if only," as in, "if only we could do this or that necessary thing." Irv would say, "Why the fuck not?" It was a wild, mind-expanding experience of working with someone with the bold vision necessary to see that in order to become strong enough to be an effective countervailing power, we must become strong enough to contest for prevailing power. That's how far she saw. And she saw that dream in me, too. She would encourage me, saying, "You should be the Paul Weyrich of the left." Paul Weyrich, the great American architect of political right wing, not me. In the end, though, Irv, of course, claimed that mantle for herself. She was entirely right to do so, and as she did, I finally mustered the mental gumption and pluck to say back to her, "I'll flank you like Phyllis Schlafly." Now, Irv's brilliance and unsinkable optimism was infectious, and it's paying off. The 22nd Century Initiative is now beginning its second official year of operation. We now have 5 staff people working together, and we have built a network called 1201, referring to the time on the hour of democracy, not 11:59, but 1201. It includes 67 members representing organizations from all over the country, big and small, national groups like the Sierra Club, the LGBTQ Equality Federation, and the Women's March, alongside grassroots organizations like Rural Organizing Project of Oregon, Faith for Black Lives, 100 Days in Appalachia, and United Vision for Idaho. And we are growing. Just this week, welcoming the Secure Families Initiative, an organization led by active duty military spouses. We expect membership to exceed 100 organizations by the summer of 2023, when we will host the 22nd Century Conference, a national gathering modeled after creating change that is being organized most appropriately by Irv's old pal, Sue Hyde. And alongside that work, we're also creating an anti-authoritarian donor advising program that will join program officers and individual donor advisors with experts in the field in the US and abroad to hone more effective strategies to defeat the right. It is our hope that it will evolve into a think-act tank for the pro-democracy movement. That, in particular, was part of Irv's vision. And there's much, much more. What we've accomplished is a testament to the power of why the fuck not. But if you will bear with me for a moment, in spite of all of the years of comradeship and her many accomplishments, my most indelible memory of Irv will be the moment during her final hospitalization when she appeared on a 22nd Century team call from her damn hospital bed. We were talking on Zoom, me and Carla Sutherland, who's here, and I think Robin Kane, who's here as well. When all of a sudden we saw those little dots warning you, someone is joining, and thought, who could this be? And then poof, there was Urvashi, with humor and as ever, a clenched fist in the face of injustice. Clenched fists, you know, that clenched fist. Trying to take part. There she was, still showing up, looking to the future and rooting us on. I will remember her that way always. Your legacy lives on, sis. You remain in our hearts forever. Thank you.
I'm Trishala Deb. I was privileged to have 4 chapters with Urvashi in 4 different decades over the course of 26 years. The first time I met Urvashi was in 1996 after her virtual equality book reading at Emory University. Along with a whole gaggle of baby South Asian dykes, I told her how much it meant to me not only to see that she actually existed, but to see her be completely unapologetic about claiming power. Years later, Suzanne Farr took me along on a visit to the task force, and we met in person and started a decade of disagreements about structural change, left theory, policy priorities, and whether the Talking Heads was actually a punk rock band. So you can imagine my surprise when she invited me to work for her at the Arcus Foundation years later. How many people have you spent years arguing with who then give you such a big break? That seeming contradiction was the heart of our connection. In Indian culture, argument and debate is a sign of deep respect. I was not being hired despite our disagreements, but because of them. And over the course of these years, I have seen so many people from different ages and political tendencies welcomed by Irv. I saw her truly listen to every one of us and parse through the ideological formations that we're made of and marvel at those differences. The instinct to complicate an idea is a deeply Indian instinct, and I saw her nurture the leadership of so many people over time by complicating us. Some of us know what it's like to stand up in a space and be the first one to say, I'm queer, I'm a lesbian, I'm gay, I'm trans. When it comes to being a South Asian queer, I didn't have to do that because Irv did it for us. But in the mid-90s, we still had a lot of conversations about whether being gay was really just a white thing or an American thing. And Urvashi was our beacon that we could point to. Irv's generation, many of you here and many of you from the global South, led an era of culture change that actually resolved that conversation. What happens when women go bad, when we're seen as non-compliant? What happens when Indian women go bad? When queer women of color go bad, when lesbians go bad, and then what happens when we get mad? What happens is Urvashi. Our beloved Irv. I loved raging with Urvashi. We laughed so much, and she was always way more free in her thinking and her conceptions of what's possible. What can love drive us to do? Not just love for our people, but love for queerness itself, for bold, shameless, truth-telling, reality-defining, unafraid radical love. That was the essence of our 3rd chapter, when I briefly accompanied Irv and Carla Sutherland in the LGBTQ Poverty Collaborative Project. Being a queer immigrant is one way to understand what it means to be an outsider. Both the pain and the freedom of truly understanding the illusions of belonging. After decades of working towards integration, the choice that Urvashi made to focus on poverty, criminalization, the reality of lesbians in America, and authoritarianism is a love letter to us all. It is a declaration of the most radical of ideas, to choose the largest we, to center those that are not benefiting enough from the LGBTQ movement and all the movements as they have been, is to declare our shared fate beyond comfort and assimilation, and to recognize the shared threat of the war that the right wing wants to bring about. It is the only way to keep our full humanity and queerness through the allure of false progress. My last chapter with Irv was a wonderful space just rooted in friendship. During the pandemic, we had regular hangouts organized by Terry McGovern, where we talked a whole lot of trash and processed cancer, political crisis, and strategic choices. In the space between righteousness and being right can be tenderness. It was in this tenderness that I really got to witness the powerfully enduring love story of Irv and Kate, and my most treasured lesson on queer love, on what it looks like to spend decades being lovers and fighters, and choosing to be completely present in vulnerability and honesty. My last message to Irv and Kate together was after an incredible dinner they hosted right before Irv went into the hospital in May. It was to share a poem with my gratitude for the gift of presence with both of them. Irv gave me so many gifts. The last one was the chance to witness her relationship with Kate and to learn from your love. This is the poem that I shared. For Keeps by Joy Harjo. Sun makes the day new. Tiny green plants emerge from earth. Birds are singing the sky into place. There is nowhere else I want to be but here. I lean into the rhythm of your heart to see where it will take us. We gallop into a warm southern wind. I link my legs to yours and we ride together toward the ancient encampment of our relatives. Where have you been, they ask, and what has taken you so long? That night, after eating, singing, and dancing, we laid together under the stars. We know ourselves to be part of mystery. It is unspeakable. It is everlasting. It is for keeps. Thank you.
Be a big dyke, but I have to tell you, I'm not the biggest. Because I'm going to introduce to you the biggest dyke I ever knew. She's a rabble-rouser that you know as well as I know. She's from Provincetown, Massachusetts, and her name is Urvashi Vaid.
With hearts full of love and with an abiding faith in justice, we have come to Washington to speak to America. As a younger activist, I believed in utopia and hard work. I guess you could say I was an idealist with a practical streak.
We live in a pluralistic society, and I believe in it, and I'm committed to it, and that's what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for the space to live my life freely and in peace.
My idea of utopia was a society that distributed the benefits of its prosperity more widely. Like legions of progressive activists, I committed myself to achieving this redistribution through the work of the social movements that I joined. What I think the movements of the 60s failed to do was to tackle the structural inequalities in American society, equalities which arise from the consequences of a morally bankrupt and absolutely out of control economic system. You wanted to hear the other side of the equation, and I'm going to put it out to you.
She may be the most courageous coming into here today, and I hope she'll get all of your respect. Urvashi Vaid.
Progressive politics is, for many of us, a politics of intersection, not identity affiliation alone.
I'm not
just here to stand up as a lesbian. I'm here as a woman. I'm here as an immigrant. I'm here against racism. I'm here for health care for all. I'm here for freedom of expression. I'm here to change the status quo because I believe in America and I believe in the future of this country. As Adrian Rich wrote, the connections between and among women are the most feared, the most problematic, don't we know that? And the most potentially transforming force on the planet. I love being a lesbian. I love it. I'm an optimist, and I really believe that change is gonna come, and change is happening all the time. And I'm also struck by how I did not think that I would see the changes that I've seen in my lifetime. When all of us who believe in freedom and diversity see this gathering, we see beauty and power. When our enemies see this gathering, they see the millennium. Well, perhaps the religious right is about something. We call today for the end of the world as we know it. We call for the end of racism and sexism and bigotry as we know it, for the end of violence and discrimination and homophobia as we know it, for the end of sexism as we know it. We stand for freedom as we have yet to know it, and we will not be denied.
Oh, God. That is what is known as a tough act to follow. Urvashi was like our very own La Pasionara. And after the speech in Washington, where she just ripped the roof off everything, Ossie Davis was coming up to speak after her, and he looked at her and he said, "I've seen the best," and that was good. I actually couldn't follow the video too much. I was watching her lips. I miss her lips. She had the best lips, and the softest skin. Could I talk about that a little while? Okay. She was just so hot. She was hot. And actually one night I was lying in bed next to her, and I was in the middle of this nightmare dream that I was in a flaming house and a big, what do you call those things in American English? Boy, some cognitive loss happened during the last days of Urvashi's life. I can't remember words. Anyway, but I was lying there and this big beam came down. Thanks for the help. And I felt you were coming with it and I went with it. But a big giant beam came down and it was on fire and it had trapped me. And I woke up and it was Urvashi's leg had just trapped me in bed. It's so good to be together. It's really like old homo week here. And it's great to be here for this memorial celebration of Urvashi's way too short life. So thank you for all of you for coming and being here. Urvashi was an amazing organizer. And thankfully, she has many organizing friends. So even though my name is on the program, Sharon and Richard did the work. Thank you. In the months since Urvashi died on May 14th, my work mostly has been trying to sit upright. So thank you also to Sharon Kleinbaum, the Rabbi, Lady Synagoga, who it's not mine. It wasn't mine. It wasn't mine, but it's so good. thanks to Sharon, who co-organized with Richard while leading observance of the high holidays and while going on a field trip to Ukraine. She organized this with Richard. Thank you to Richard Burns. A big round of applause. Thank you. Richard gives new meaning to multitasking. In addition to his day job and serving on several boards and making the dream of the American LGBTQ+ Museum a reality, he made that happen. He and Sharon organized this wonderful celebration, and also with the help of many of you who Richard mentioned, and they're in your program, which is a beautiful program. It's a gorgeous program. So thank you, of course, also to all of our speakers, to Gloria, Trishala, Scott, Tony, Alok, and to Urvashi. Thank you also to all of our live streamers who are tuning in right now and having parties at home. We've got a home audience. It's so exciting to me. And congratulations to all of you from the digitally challenged that actually got on. And I'm jealous, actually. But if you just finally figured out how to join us and are joining us now, don't let this outfit fool you. This is not Gentleman Jack. It's not that. I know many of you are disappointed, but you're in the right place, is my point. Over her career, Urvashi had many, many offices. And in almost every office that she had a bookshelf, of course, and on the bookshelf somewhere, conspicuously displayed and placed, was a book called Freedom is an Endless Meeting. She was in hours of meetings. She ran hours of meetings. She racked up thousands of Zoom hours. She was in decades of meetings, if you put them all together. During COVID, when she was working from home and I was eavesdropping, there always seemed a moment in a meeting when I would hear her say, let's take a moment and check in with each other about how you've been doing and how you're feeling. And there would be this pause. I can feel several of you seizing up right now, just with this, oh God, please don't call on me. But I will share about Urvashi's ashes. A few days after she died, we had a funeral for Urvashi, followed by a cremation. Rabbi Kleinbaum emceed the funeral and opened with a very memorable call and response. 2 people remember it. Urvashi was in a very simple pine box, and she was wearing her beloved Lesbian Avenger t-shirt. You're welcome. Urvashi and I had talked many times about cremation and how we wanted to disperse our ashes. We both wanted our ashes to be scattered from the breakwater, the jetty that's in the west end of Provincetown. We even had decided on the rock that we would stand on. The jetty has 2 small turns. It goes out and then it turns and turns a little bit slightly. And each turn is marked by this wonderful triangular capstone. And the 2 capstones became our prayer stones, the please and thank you stones. On the way out, the stones were a please prayer. And on the way back, a thank you stone. For example, on the way out, the walk out, it could be, please God, help Hillary Clinton become president. And on the way back, it was, thanks a bunch. But alas, the sad super spreader task fell to me, and I wanted to spread her ashes on her birthday. October 8th, it felt right. She is a Libra. And I was unaware, Trishala, of the cultural notion of Indians loving to argue, but explained so much to me right then. Thank you. Here's one thing I did learn. Never, ever argue with an Indian Libra lawyer. It looks like this. Well, on the one hand, on the other hand, on the other hand, on the other hand. Oh my God. So thank you so much back there. It's a friend of mine I brought in. But I picked up Urvashi's ashes from the funeral home the day before I drove to P-Town. Her ashes were in a bag, in a box, in a bag, and the ashes were surprisingly heavy. When I got home, I put the bag on a chair in the TV room, and later that evening, I was watching TV, and I actually looked over at the box and got up and adjusted the TV so she could see better. And that night, I put her ashes on the floor on her side of the bed, and I slept better than I had in months. When I got to Provincetown, of course, there was a change in plan. The whole dying process is a major fucking change in plans, but turns out change is all there is. When I got there, my friend, Trudy Wood, a longtime P-Town resident, suggested very gently that Irv's ashes might not make it out of the harbor from the jetty, that the current really wasn't strong enough, and that there were lots of seals in the harbor. And she said, and you do not want Urvashi Vaid's ashes with seal poop. And besides, it's a long weekend, there'll be people out there, lots of tourists on the jetty, and they could report you because dispersing ashes is illegal, which we both agreed would make Urvashi really, really happy. But Trudy called a friend who had a 4-wheel drive Toyota, truck, and on Irv's birthday, a beautiful, you know it well, a beautiful, gorgeous blue sky Provincetown fall day, she drove us over sand out to the back beach and advised me, based on currents and tide speeds, where to spread her ashes. And I chose a spot out off Hatches Harbor. And the tide had been high at 11 a.m., but by noon it was just racing out. Urvashi's ashes would speed out into the race. That's where the idea of the race point, which Urvashi always called racist point, which is like, race point is where the outgoing tide meets the ocean's current and then it sends it out to sea. So I opened the bag and the box and the bag, and Urvashi's ashes almost matched the color of the sand. And as I scattered a handful of her, the wind whipped a fog of light ash into my face, and I sucked her in. My hand was wet, and the ash coated my hand, and I licked it off. She raced out into the race. I think, in a couple of months, she probably will be in the Indian Ocean. I have saved some of Urvashi's ashes in a strawberry jam jar labeled Irv Ash. It's right there, Irv Ash. Hello. But the scattering of ashes felt so right, even though some of you have reminded me that she never really liked going in the water. Richard. The few times she tried to float, she sank like a stone, which does explain why her ashes were so heavy. But letting go of her ashes has really helped me. The day after, I felt like I could let go of Irv's suffering self, that was over, that she is free of that pain, free. It is such a relief. And I could hear her laugh again. I actually pictured her chatting with Lauren Berlant. Thank you. Or scheming with our dear friend Eric Rofus. Or somewhere she was yelling at Larry Kramer. Urvashi. She is off to the great maybe. Miss Thing has become Miss Her, and we are all in an Urvashi void. We are left with, what would Urvashi do? Just read her speech in the March on Washington in the program, and you know what she would be doing. But we are left with, what would you do? Vote. And always, always keep a large supply of manila folders on hand. They make great protest signs. Crank up the Patti Smith. In what turned out to be Urvashi's final days, when it did not look good and somehow she just kept going, she told me that she was an optimistic realist. And it reminded me of what Cher once said. Or no, Che, sorry. What Che once said. It could have been Cher. It really, I meant what Che once said. Optimism is the true weapon of the revolutionary. If I could turn back time, thank you all for being here, for all of your love and support. And remember, it's not November, it's Yes-Vember. Thank you so much.
Well, that loving to argue was not just a reflection of her Indian heritage, because we all know Urvashi was a very proud Hindu. Please stand for a Hindu liturgy. Please repeat after me. Fuck cancer! Fuck the Supreme Court! Fuck the Supreme Court! Please be seated. Kate, rabbis have a secret, which is something that some comedians know as well, that recycling material is okay, it's kosher. Liturgy gets repeated all the time in the appropriate moments. Last year, when Randy and I were in Provincetown, it was the time of Diwali, and we had our Shabbat dinner, and Irv brought a box of sweets to help us celebrate Diwali. And Diwali is the moment in the Hindu calendar in which we celebrate the triumph of good over evil. And we eat sweets to celebrate that, which I, in our Hindu tradition, totally support. Triumph of good over evil. It's the festival of lights, of a moment of darkness of time, of the evening. Is Urvashi's grandnephew awake? Not yet, he's still asleep. So what? He clapped? So Urvashi's sister told me that her grandson, Urvashi's grandnephew, 4.5 years old, wanted to be at this observance. And she asked him why, and he said, I want to speak at this service, 4.5 years old. And she asked him, what would you say? And he said, I love you, Urvashi, I miss you so much. 4.5 years old. Her impact on generations is, as we've heard tonight, completely without calculation. If I asked in this room, how many people's lives have been impacted, whether you were a close friend, a colleague, or a political neophyte at her feet. How many people would say their lives have been transformed because of a relationship, whichever level, with Urvashi Vaid? Triumph of good over evil. Let's see hands. Who could say that? Diwali is only recently observed, and so we are here in some ways to represent this powerful Hindu tradition of believing in the festival of lights, of the power of goodness to triumph over evil, to argue into the late night and early morning about the way to do it, and to laugh and dance and to believe that joy itself is an act of spiritual and political resistance that we must engage in all the time. I want to say just a word about the room in which we sit. For some of you, you've just walked in here, you've never been to this place. And Richard and I really agonized about where to hold this event, and we looked around the city, and I called, and I want to acknowledge Rabbi Roli Matalon, who is the senior rabbi here at Congregation B'nai Jeshurun. He immediately said yes, and we will find a way for this to work in order to honor the memory of Urvashi and to bring all of us together. We are creating a holy gathering. Somebody said to me, is there a designated survivor for the LGBT movement that isn't here today? BJ is one of the oldest synagogues here in New York City, but it had become moribund really in the 60s and 70s. And Rabbi Marshall Meyer, who was one of the leading fighters against fascist Argentina and lived in Argentina from the late 50s through the 60s and 70s and was a great fighter against the fascist regime there, came back to the United States in order to survive, found this little dying synagogue, and created it as a social justice center of New York Jewish life. When I came to New York as rabbi in 1992, no rabbi of a major synagogue in New York City lifted up a phone to welcome me or to greet me or to bring me into the fold, so to speak. Rabbi Marshall Meyer called me up and invited me here to BJ to receive an honor at the service and to introduce me to the congregation and to make sure he was out there on the cutting edge. Of course, in 1992, that was the cutting edge of welcoming a lesbian rabbi to New York City. This synagogue is the right place for a Hindu like Urvashi to be honored. And I want to just take a moment to thank the incredible staff here. Sunny Singh, can you hear me? Can you come out here, Sunny? If Sunny can hear you, Amy, would you please come out here? Colin Weil, the executive director. The staff here has organized itself to honor Urvashi Vaid in small details and in great ones. And I just want to give a round of applause to the staff here of B'nai Jeshurun. Immediately after we end this service celebration, we are invited by we're all invited to go through these doors to my right, to your left, to a reception where there'll be food and drink in 3 different rooms. There's food and drink in all of the reception areas. And Kate is going to be in the farthest room for those of you who want to hug and kiss and schmooze with her. And there are bathrooms there as well. So those are my instructions. I was dreaming in my dreaming of an aspect bright and fair. In my sleeping it was broken, but my dream it lingered near. In the form of shining valleys where the pure air recognized, I awakened to the cry. People have the power. People have the power to redeem the work of fools. Upon the meek, the graces shower. It's decreed. Ultimately, the people will rule. The people have the power. Vengeful aspects became suspect, and bending low as if to hear. The armies ceased advancing because the people had their ear. The people have the power to wrestle the world from fools. It's decreed. I believe everything we dream can one day come to pass. We can turn the world around. We can turn the earth's revolution. We have the power. The people have the power to wrestle the world from fools. Patti Smith was a voice, a prophet, like Urvashi Vaid. Please stand as we hear Patti sing these words, the people have the power, and let's give a huge round of applause for Urvashi Vaid and live our life in her memory.